Good evening, I'm Hafiz Marzuki. Here are the top stories for tonight. Israel begins ground offensive in Gaza as UN inquiry finds top Israeli officials incited genocide. Meanwhile, Qatar and US nearing defense deal after Israel's attack in Doha, says Rubio. That and more coming up on Awani International. Israel has launched a long-awaited ground incursion into Gaza City just hours after US diplomat Marco Rubio met Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem and reaffirmed Washington's support. The city is under relentless attack. Homes and large buildings have been destroyed, and at least 68 people have been killed so far in the latest strikes. In fact, Defense Minister Israel Katz posted on X saying Gaza is burning. Speaking from a Tel Aviv courtroom where he is testifying in his corruption trial, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the bombardment the start of a new phase in the war, adding that Israel is at a decisive turning point in the conflict. The intensified airstrikes and ground incursion have drawn widespread international condemnation, including from families of hostages held by Hamas. The United Nations Commission has issued its strongest report yet on Gaza, concluding that Israel has committed genocide and that top officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, incited these acts. The 72-page report cites mass killings and blockages, forced displacement, and even the destruction of a fertility clinic as evidence.
Navi Pillay, the Commission's chair and a former war crimes judge, said Israel's leader have orchestrated a campaign with the intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza. The inquiry named three individuals, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Isaac Herzog, and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, of genocide incitement through their statements and orders. Israel rejected the findings as scandalous and fake, accusing the panel of serving Hamas. It insists the war is self-defense and in line with international law. Gaza's health ministry reports nearly 65,000 killed in the two-year war, mostly women and children. Almost the entire population is displaced, 90% of homes destroyed, and famine declared in Gaza City.
Qatar and the US are finalizing an enhanced defense cooperation agreement following Israel's strike on Hamas political leaders in Doha last week. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the plan while traveling from Tel Aviv to Doha. He also urged Qatar to continue mediating between Israel and Hamas, calling it the most likely broker of a ceasefire in Gaza. The strike was seen as particularly sensitive, given Qatar's close ties with Washington and its role as host of the largest US military base in the region. Qatar, which has been leading ceasefire talks alongside Egypt for nearly 2 years, has said it will not be deterred from its role. During a visit in May, President Donald Trump had assured Qatar that the US would protect it if attacked. He said he was not informed in advance about the Israeli strike by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump repeated those assurances in New York on Friday during a meeting with Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed Abdulrahman Al Thani. Stay tuned for more after the break.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro Awani menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Arab and Muslim leaders are turning up the pressure on Israel. After emergency talks in Doha, they issued a joint call urging members to review relations with Israel, including diplomatic and economic ties, and to explore possible legal action.
The statement also went further, encouraging coordination on suspending Israel's membership at the United Nations. The gathering brought together nearly 60 countries under the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. It follows last week's Israeli strike in Doha that killed senior Hamas members. Among those present at the meeting were states that recognize Israel, such as the UAE, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, and Morocco. However, the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco sent senior officials rather than their heads of state.
The extraordinary summit of Arab and Islamic leaders produced no major shift on Gaza or Israel's impending attacks. Saqib Sheikh, a research scholar at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies, notes the statement mostly reiterates previous condemnations of Israeli actions, offering little new in terms of policy or pressure.
And these are all generally along the lines of what the various countries, Islamic, the Muslim countries that came together have been saying already. So there wasn't really a dramatic change. There was some language that suggested that more punitive measures or more measures towards deterrence of Israel to conduct such activities would take place, but it didn't really spell it out. Even though during the meeting, you saw at various points several countries raise possible ideas, and I think that that wasn't really reflected in the final resolution, the final document, but it certainly is being discussed. And I think that perhaps one reason why it didn't fall into the final communication is that there may be a positioning issue, that a dramatic shift in the posture of any of these countries in the short term seems unlikely, given how much investment they have in perhaps certain security arrangements with the United States or just their existing economic arrangements. So it didn't really translate into any major change in policy that could be reflected from the document.
An extraordinary summit in Doha on September 15th brought together leaders from the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, following an Israeli strike on Qatari soil earlier this month. In a joint statement, the leaders condemned Israel's actions in Gaza and Doha and raised the possibility of a joint defense mechanism to counter Israeli aggression. Saqib Sheikh notes, however, that such an alliance could take years to materialize.
Security relationship with the United States. So the idea of transitioning from that in the short term seems unlikely. But what we are hearing are different signals from some of the countries. So Qatar, they suggested they're going to ramp up defense spending from 16 to 25 billion. And a lot of that defense spending, from what they've indicated, is going to be shifted towards China, Russia, other countries outside of the United States. That would be a sort of indicator that there is some flexibility of creating their own security arrangements. And it is a possibility in the long term.
He also said Israel would not regard the extraordinary summit as a genuine threat, given its confidence in U.S. backing and its drive to block any prospects for a Palestinian state. Without coordinated action, Saqib said, Arab and Islamic states will struggle to deter Israel, which continues expanding settlements and reshaping Gaza to prevent Palestinian sovereignty. Israel has been pressing ahead with its campaign in Gaza, with Israeli forces intensifying strikes on Gaza City as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Jerusalem in a show of political support.
US President Donald Trump says Washington and Beijing have reached a deal to keep TikTok operating in the United States, shifting its US assets from China's ByteDance to American owners. Trump told reporters, "We have a deal," and that a group of very big companies want to buy it, but offered very few details. TikTok has 170 million users in America, and its future has been at the center of a long-running dispute over national security and the broader US-China tech war. Washington fears Beijing could use the app to spy or influence Americans. TikTok insists its US data is kept on domestic servers and content decisions made locally. Final confirmation of the deal is expected Friday in a call between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Any agreement will need approval from the Republican-controlled Congress. Now, China's Coast Guard has fired water cannon at Philippine ships near Scarborough Shoal, escalating tension in the South China Sea. Beijing accused more than 10 Philippine vessels of entering Chinese waters from several directions, violating its sovereignty and claimed one deliberately rammed its ship. However, the Philippine Maritime Council rejected the allegations as false and misleading, calling them part of a wider disinformation campaign.
Tensions between the two countries have simmered for years, marked by repeated clashes at sea and large-scale naval drills. Just last week, China approved plans to designate Scarborough, or Huangyan Island as Beijing calls it, a national nature reserve, though it has not set boundaries. Manila also claims the shoal, known locally as Panatak. China insists nearly the entire South China Sea is its own, overlapping the exclusive zones of several neighbors. In 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague ruled against Beijing's claims. China has never recognized that decision.
A U.S. appeals court has ruled that Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook can remain in her post, blocking an effort by President Donald Trump to remove her just ahead of a key interest rate meeting. The judges rejected Trump's claim that Cook should be suspended, while the courts decide whether he has the authority to dismiss her over alleged past mortgage fraud.
The decision is a setback for the White House, which has been pressing the Fed to cut rates. But Trump did secure a win on the same day. The Senate confirmed his nominee, Stephen Miran, to the Fed board, giving him a voice at this week's policy meeting. That meeting, set for Tuesday and Wednesday, is widely expected to deliver a rate cut in response to a cooling labour market. Cook, the first black woman on the Fed board, was accused of mortgage fraud, an allegation she denies. Judges said she stays on the job for now, noting that she wasn't given a chance to respond to the allegations. Trump's legal team argued that presidents have broad power to remove Fed governors, but the court ruled Cook remains protected by law.
South Korea's presidential office says tariff talks with the United States have stalled, despite progress on a broader trade deal in July. In a statement on Tuesday, the office says President Lee Jae-myung will not rush into an agreement that could burden Korean companies.
It added that while Seoul wants a swift resolution, it cannot accept every American demand at the expense of national interests. At the center of the dispute is a proposed $350 billion investment fund, which both sides have yet to agree on key details. Meanwhile, South Korea's top trade envoy, Yohan Koo, is currently in Washington for follow-up talks. He said negotiations remained intensive, but reaching a final agreement was proving difficult.
A high threat level has been declared at Windsor Castle ahead of US President Donald Trump's controversial second state visit. Security measures will cover the skies, streets, and the River Thames, with a temporary airspace restriction banning non-police drones and small aircraft.
Trump and First Lady Melania Trump are expected to arrive at the castle's private estate on Tuesday evening, where they will be hosted by King Charles. The couple will later travel to Chequers for talks with Prime Minister Keir Starmer at his country residence. The visit comes as the UK grapples with political turmoil. Starmer's hand-picked ambassador to Washington was fired last week after revelations of years-old correspondence with convicted financier Jeffrey Epstein. The Prime Minister's approval ratings are also sliding, with the far-right Reform UK party surging ahead in some polls.
Visa revocations are underway for non-US citizens accused of celebrating the death of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the US will not host foreigners who cheer on the killing of American citizens.
In a post on X, he warned that those who celebrate the assassination of a political figure should prepare to be deported. Kirk was fatally shot while addressing an audience at a university in Utah on September 10th. The Trump administration has already revoked hundreds of visas as part of a wider immigration crackdown. Last month, officials said they were reviewing records of all US visa holders for possible violations that could lead to deportation.
That's Awani International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the rivalries, strategies, and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more, head to international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Hafiz Mazuki, and on behalf of the team, we would like to wish you all Selamat Hari Malaysia. Thank you for watching and good night.